Hey everybody, there are a lot of tabletop role-playing games out there that aren't D&D. And on the show today, I have an example of just that. Cyberblood is a cyberpunk-based game, but the setting is completely different from things that you've seen before. Mike is on the show to tell me all about it. Stick around. That interview starts now. Hey Michael, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
So we have dueling mics. For your mic,
Yes.
Mike. You said you also use the handle macro?
Yeah, macro or macro cell. That's kind of what I wrote the game under, and it's what I go by on in the RPG kind of circuit.
There you go. Right. Click. That is the reason why you're on, is because you have a new TTRPG that is launching, and it's called Cyberblood. And I'm really interested in it because the artwork really drew me in. Why don't you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so Cyberblood is a cyberpunk tabletop role-playing game, and most of the artwork that you're probably talking about was done by a guy named Logan Stahl, who for a number of years was an independent kind of comic-inspired artist, and he did a lot of work on various smaller projects here and there, and I kind of just noticed his stuff, and right away I was like, this has this kind of like classic comic book vibe that really goes with the sort of 80s, 90s aesthetic that I wanted Cyberblood to have. And so it was like a perfect match. And he lives on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. But after months and months of working with this guy, I did actually get a chance to meet him in person a couple months ago when I visited New York. So that was super fun.
It's awesome. Artwork is such an intrinsic part of any game, and yours drew me in right away. So why don't you tell me, there's cyberpunk, there's cyber dystopia, there's a bunch of different games that have a cyberpunk moniker. What is different about your game?
I think there's a couple things that are different. Probably the setting, the world that it takes place in is probably a little different. And then the system itself has some differences as well. I think for the system, the biggest thing that people are going to notice when they roll up some characters in Cyberblood and give it a spin is that it doesn't have experience points. So Cyberblood doesn't have experience, it doesn't have levels, it doesn't have leveling up or gaining abilities in that sense. So immediately it's going to set itself apart from your traditional heroic fantasy like Dungeons and Dragons. And the kind of theme of a lot of cyberpunk settings, and Cyberblood is no different in this regard, is the kind of capitalist run amok, capitalism out of control sort of thing. Everything can be bought and sold. Everything has a number associated with it. And because of that, currency in Cyberblood is treated like the substitute for experience points. You complete jobs, you complete missions, or you just steal from people. The money that you get from those actions you spend on new equipment, new items, new weapons, or you use it to influence other people. That is your equivalent to leveling your character up. It's not one-to-one. You can lose stuff, stuff can break, and you might be back at square one. But generally speaking, the more of those connections you make and the more gear and gadgets and cybernetic stuff that you've got, the better off you are later in the game against more difficult challenges.
Yeah, I like that. I like money as influence and power.
It's a good thing the real world isn't like that, right?
Oh, yeah, thank goodness. Now, from the setting, obviously, it's capitalism gone awry or gone right, based off some people's thoughts on it. How long did it take you to develop the system and the world that you're playing in?
So originally, I never set out, when I started writing Cyberblood, I didn't set out to make a product that people, just strangers, could play. I was doing it as sort of a pet project that was sort of a hobby that I just did because I enjoyed doing it. And so I've been working on Cyberblood kind of unofficially since like 2013. So it's been over 10 years at this point. But Cyberblood as the RPG that people know now really only started to take shape around 2020. I think a lot of people have this similar story where you're sitting at home, you can't go out, you can't see anybody, maybe you can't even go to work. And at a certain point, you get bored of video games and you get bored of watching TV and you're like, well, what do I do? And for me, it was like dusting off this project that I'd been working on and I messaged some people on a forum. I said, hey, I've got this system. Would you help me test it? And that's kind of where the official progress began.
Yeah, the play testing is always very interesting because I think you get some feedback that maybe you weren't expecting. Was there any surprise comments that you got about the game as you started to create and test it?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think by and large, the stuff that stuck out to me was balance related stuff. Players in general are really, really good at breaking games, whether they do it on purpose or not.
Sure.
And so there were quite a few examples of people finding combinations of items or combinations of things that everything is supposed to be kind of like give you that superpower in an RPG. You're supposed to feel powerful, but sometimes they took it to such a degree that I was like, oh, this was unintended. So there were some items that I had to reel back a little bit because they were so effective at what they did that it kind of ruined the game a little bit.
Sure. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think the one example that comes to mind is there was so in Cyberblood you have firearms and you also have there's the regular ammunition, and then there's a lot of like kind of special purpose ammunition. And there's like a bunch of different types of it that do different things. But one in particular was called liquid laser ammunition. And it was basically just a flat damage buff to whatever weapon you're using. Because they're like magnesium-filled bullets that are like really devastating. The simple answer was it was much too effective for how much they cost. So it was like a no-brainer. Every player just loaded up on liquid laser rounds and just annihilated everything that they went up against. So I had to like increase the cost of that specific special ammunition to make it more balanced.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you mentioned, without having experience points, it really is all about your gear and what you can do with it. That's your legend that you create for yourself is based off the stuff that you have. So it's pretty awesome.
Right.
When you think about Cyberpunk, what games come to mind that you've enjoyed playing?
For me, Cyberpunk is kind of an interesting genre where I feel like it kind of was born and died. And only recently have we seen a resurgence with it.
Yeah.
Whereas stuff like traditional fantasy, like not specifically Dungeons and Dragons, but just Lord of the Rings and Harry Potter and like all those things that are in that more traditional kind of fantasy has been like ubiquitous for the last 150 years. Whereas Cyberpunk, it kind of showed up a little bit in the 70s, got really big in the 80s and 90s, and then just disappeared. The Matrix comes out, and the Matrix was like the swan song of Cyberpunk, and then you never heard about it again.
I've never thought about it that way.
And so for me, Cyberpunk is very much a cinematic and literary genre more than a game genre. Of course, there's the Cyberpunk RPG that everybody knows and had a huge impact on the industry. And then there's stuff like Shadowrun, which of course is influential in its own way. But I know more people that play Blades in the Dark and like Starfinder than I do people who play like Shadowrun. So I think that it's coming back. There was like that anime that came out, and we've had a couple movies recently that are Cyberpunk, but to me, it's cinema. To me, it's like Blade Runner, Akira, and then a lot of like anime like Bubblegum Crisis and Ghost in the Shell, a huge one. Yeah. So that to me is what Cyberpunk is.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It is, as much as we're looking at it from the game standpoint, it really is a cinematic feeling, but it has these sensibilities associated with it that are always so fun to watch on screen. And when you play it, it's actually pretty freeing because you could do whatever you want to do. You know, when you think about it, it's like I can have a cybernetic arm or an eye or modify my body in any way, shape, or form that I want to be the person I want to be, which I think a lot of games are like that. But the Cyberpunk is really gritty.
Yeah.
I still love that. Again, you mentioned 80s or 90s. So Johnny Mnemonic type stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Very good. You are releasing the game here soon, or is it out currently?
So it's coming out, the game comes out June 4th, and it's going to be digitally available on it.
Okay. I will have links down below to all of that good stuff. Is there going to be an option to print it as well or get a hard copy?
There won't be an option for getting a hard copy from us directly. Obviously, if people want to print parts of the book to make their sessions easier or more fun, I don't have a problem with that. The core rules, there's 2 books, but the core rules comes with like character sheets that are designed in such a way to be printed. So even if you don't print the rest of the book, the character sheets are easily printable. And I'm the kind of person who, when I play an RPG, even if I'm playing online, I always print the character sheet because it makes it more like tangible for me. So I wanted that option 100% when I put the game together.
I look forward to seeing anything that you're producing. This sounds really good. And again, the artwork, chef's kiss. It's perfect. And I wish you the best of luck. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.